So hi, I'm Lisa from Pride Road Architects, and in our series Architects in the Den, I'm delighted to welcome Rion Willard. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Greetings. Hi, I'm Rion Willard. I am an architect and I'm the host of the Business of Architecture UK and the co-founder of that, and a consultant where I help architects create businesses that they love and that is fulfilling and creates the lifestyle that they want to have.
So we're about to be welcoming some listeners onto the call. But in the meantime, Rion and I are just having a little chat. So I'm just going to share my screen. For podcasters, you won't be able to see this. But in real life, I am going to stop this because I really don't want anyone seeing this.
I like it. You're showing us. You're showing us the invoices. This is the most important part of an architecture practice: is the invoicing.
Oh, dear.
What's your favourite part about a business? Invoicing.
It's all right. Invoicing.
Invoicing is great. That's the best part of it. I love invoicing.
I remember my business coach told me, because I when I first set up my business and I got bills, she said, when a bill arrives, you've got to say thank you.
Yeah.
Because it's thank you for a piece of work that's been done. And so it completely just reframes the way that I thought about receiving bills for anything. And that's kind of like been true ever since. You know, you get a bill for subcontractors' work, thank you very much for doing that piece of work. Do you say mentally, not necessarily to them, but you should also say thank you to them. You know, you get an invoice for an eBay purchase of, I don't know, a Lego figure.
It's like a customized Lego figure. I love it.
Hold on. I've got too much going on my screen. So, yeah, this isn't going to work very well on a podcast, but yes.
Oh, I love it. Where did you get that from?
Just a little lockdown session.
Was this someone did you design this yourself, or did
Lego? I've pulled it together from a little kit of parts.
I didn't know you could get into so much detail with the Lego figures these days.
It's a bit sad.
Oh, Lisa. That's next level branding. I love it.
I'll put this on my Twitter feed. It's a Lego. Do you want to describe it, Rion?
It's a beautiful, elegant Lego figure of someone who looks like Lisa with the fabulous hair, standing in front of the Pride Road banner and logo. It's wonderful.
Oh, thank you very much.
Very nice indeed.
It's a bit bonkers. It's been my lockdown obsession, Lego.
Right.
And it's worked really well. Started by making a house, just one of those kit of parts. It's in the background of here. Can you see that?
Very nice. These kind of Victorian townhouses things.
Yes, and then it's kind of developed into making. I made a kit of parts. So it's all about sort of.
Oh, very nice.
So because we specialise in domestic residential, I've made a typical kind of our typical vernacular. So I've got Victorian terrace, and I've also got a pair of semis.
Love it.
But it's really useful to start I've used it all today just to start.
I enjoyed your TikTok video when you had them.
Yes.
When you were able to very clearly articulate the difference between a hip gable and a regular gable.
But what I'm finding is they're really useful for clients. They can, especially over Zoom, when you need to engage with someone, you're trying to you're trying to visually engage with people, get them looking, get them interested, engage in a different way, and it's not just an audio visual thing. You've got to change how you communicate, I think, when you're on when you're on Zoom. I can see someone in our waiting room. Rachel, do you want to just start allowing people in? So we're just going to be allowing people in on the call.
So is Rachel like the bouncer?
Yeah, she's on.
She's like the digital bouncer. You ain't got a ticket, you ain't coming in.
Absolutely. So the way that I've run this event, I've run it as a webinar on Eventbrite. So
cool.
People have kind of got tickets. They can listen in and they can submit questions, and it'll just come through the chat. So
great. Okay.
Cool.
So we got Shirin. Hi, Shirin. Pleasure to meet you.
Except they're on mute. So it's just you and me talking.
Great.
Well,
no, it was interesting. You were saying about how you say a kind of a little act of gratitude every time you receive an invoice. And I remember when I worked with a business mentor. He said the same thing. You know, every time you make a payment to somebody or you pay a bill, say thank you for getting the job done, or even if it was something like a credit card bill or something, or something that wasn't what you wanted. That act has kind of furthered you along in your process. It's furthered you along in your goals and in your ambitions, and it's a lovely way of reframing paying bills. And then it makes you really enjoy sending out the invoices, which is great fun.
Yeah. So for those who missed the start of the conversation, it was just about me sort of thanking the world whenever I receive an invoice, because you are thanking the universe for work that's been done. And it really does, ever since I've done that, it does reframe how you see finances. Makes you appreciate your outgoings. I actually quite like reconciling my invoices. It's quite fun, and it's really good doing an audit over a month when you have to give your accountant the receipts and just say, oh, I spent that on marketing, or well, that's when such and such happened, or I met such and such a person, or it's really
well, it's nice, isn't it? It's like a little like a kind of a sort of timeline of events and little things, and you become aware of all the all the transactions. It's very interesting actually, because it's like just when we start to think about money, we start to recognize that it's an energy. And that it's something that's moving. Like it's called currency because it's moving, like electric currents, right? There's transactions that are happening when we talk about high-end properties, or we talk about the property market, we talk about volumes of transactions. So thinking about money as being a store of something like water, that it naturally wants to be in movement, right? And if you hold it too long, it gets stagnant and things that are untoward grow in it. It's a useful metaphor to sort of think about our businesses as being organisms, and that money is the sort of the life force that flows in and out of them. So any kind of reframing of these sorts of seemingly dry things or topics that we don't normally talk about, I always think gives another dimension to what it is that we're doing, and starts to prioritize money as well in our practices. I suppose this is one of the conversations that I'm having a lot with architecture owners at the moment, is around all sorts of subconscious beliefs around money and finance, and the way that it's kind of viewed in the profession, and the struggling for it or the not struggling for it. And I think that's certainly one of the conversations that we were talking about today, being about a freedom practice, right? Or the kind of the concept of freedom, and yet one of the biggest things that we don't have a lot of freedom around is with finance and money and its meaning, what it means to us. It gets really, really overly meaningful.
I mean, I remember when I first set up, trying to send out that first invoice was sort of exciting and daunting. And then it's sort of like after that, I used to be really nervous about sending out invoices. And because you're almost frightened of them and a bit nervous, you then start delaying how long it takes before you send them out. You get behind. And you really start to lose control of the project when that happens. So no, we're very keen on invoicing sort of straight away now.
Yeah.
Let's appreciate it. You know, clients want to know exactly where they're up to with the project. They don't want an invoice coming in 6 weeks later, 6 months later, because they won't have they'll have spent the money that they've accounted for you.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we look at it in property, property people, property developers, they like speed. There's a reason they like speed, and they often talk about money likes speed. Money likes decisions to be made fast. It likes to be able to move quickly. When you're scaling businesses up as well, the conversation is always about, the speed of finance. This stuff it's interesting. And when we start to see it as an energy as well, it opens up a different conversation around it, for sure.
I think it definitely needs reframing, money, and it's not a dirty word. I mean, I don't know at what point we were taught at architecture school that money was dirty.
Well, I think it's more to do with the fact that we don't talk about money. And obviously the way that we learn about money will come from our parents, it will come from our family. And most middle class and families have there's a certain societal way of thinking and behaving around money. And then at architecture school, we leave money out. So at architecture school, we have a long gestation period, maybe, it's the 7, 8, 9, 10 year long process of becoming an architect. And then in the design work that we do, very rarely, I don't know if this was different for you in your experience, but when I was at school, we never did a project that had any financial grounding whatsoever. So you never did a project to a budget ever. You didn't even talk about a budget. And in fact, talking about a budget was seen as a big inhibitor to your creativity. So by not talking about it, we're already developing a particular paradigm that we're going to take on into a business. And I kind of like, money is going to, when we talk about money, when we talk about developers, when we talk about people who are interested in money, they're kind of, they're not interested in the good stuff, which is design. They're not interested in. And
I've given some guest talks at, I think it was UCLan and Salford, on their kind of degree, architectural CAT, the architectural technology course, and they did multidisciplinary projects with sort of the QSs and structural engineers, or the students, and I think that was really valuable. Actually putting them together. Whereas when I trained, we never went anywhere near a quantity surveyor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when I first started running practice, that was obviously one of the key things that the client was so keen to know about was having some sort of financial control over the project. And they're looking to us as the architects to be able to advise on that. And, some projects can, and again, this all depends on how you set up your relationship with your client. But, that kind of wanting to know the difference in price between certain decisions that are being made. That's always, no matter how wealthy the client is, there's always that as a conversation. Every client has a business agenda. They've got a budget that they're working to. So being able to be conversant and literate in understanding what the value of the project is that you're designing, how money's working, how your design decisions are impacting the finance, and being responsible about that is absolutely key. Not having that ability, not being able to do that as architects, has left the architectural profession very vulnerable to other disciplines that are very good at talking commercially and aligning themselves with business agendas of clients to come in and overtake those roles. And I do think that does start at university. And that's not necessarily to say that university needs to suddenly put the chains and shackles around students' creativities and say you've got to design this project to X amount of money, but you could have a conversation around money of like, well, okay, if the design was going to cost this much, how could you raise it? What are the sorts of business models that would be needed for a practice to be able to operate like this, to set up a project like this? How would it be scalable? You know, we're so good at university at being able to be, you know, to dance and be creative with all these different constraints that the world of architecture throws at us, from engineering, the politics, the planning, to, you know, the tight sites, to the you know, the landscape in the site. But when it comes to commerce and economics, we take a step back.
Absolutely. And I think we need to understand, I think this goes to kind of practitioners and out there, is actually understand how long you take to do stuff. Understand your own worth, understand how much you need to earn to be able to keep a roof over your head or pay those nice bills. So you need to understand how much, what your overheads are, and then what you need to charge, and then how long does it take you to do stuff. So how long does it take you to go and meet a client, or do a site survey, or write a fee proposal, or do some research? And then once you start understanding that, then you can start kind of tranching down your services and go, right, it's going to take me 2 hours to do a site appraisal, or 2 days to do, you know, to research a planning application, or whatever.
Yeah.
So becoming a bit more literate about our own time, about how, you know, how we work as individuals. I think that's important.
Absolutely.
So if we were to sort of like come back to the title of of this,
Yeah.
creating a freedom practice, have you had any thoughts about that?
Well, the idea of a, you know, of a freedom practice, I think certainly comes from, you know, a lot of architects that I speak to are really stuck in the business, right? So it becomes a real slog every single day. It is lots and lots of work, and I suppose the idea of a freedom practice is, you know, building a business which has some form of dependability to it, right? There's some form of it being able to compensate you well, right? So that you're well rewarded for your time and your effort. I think anybody who runs a business, and you know, my experience when I first started running an architecture practice was, you know, you quickly find yourself working so many crazy hours to get paid even less than what you were getting paid in your lowly paid architecture job.
Yeah.
That's a very common experience. I mean, to be fair, there's a lot of wisdom that comes out of that experience as well. Like, I don't advise it, but there's also, you know, for me personally, I learned a lot from, you know, like you were saying, not being aware of how long things were taking, your time, the effort it takes to find a client, the effort it takes to kind of keep in contact with the client. You're as a sole practitioner, you're doing everything. You're taking all these roles on. Now, that's fine for the beginning parts of your business, and like, you know, when you run a business, you're going to have to put in a shed load of energy and effort to get it into a place where you can kind of start to step out of it. So this idea of a freedom practice is moving away from being the person who does everything inside of the business, but you're able to start to choose and do the things that you enjoy the most, and that you've got a set of effective systems and strategies in place for growth. You've got a niche market that makes the selling process easier for you. You've trained yourself in sales and communication so that you're more fluent and you're able to talk to clients and understand what it is that they need, so that you can price your services higher. Right, you're not running a practice which has got all loads of unnecessary overheads, like, you know, you're renting out large studio spaces and doing lots of unnecessary model making and all sorts of, you know, hiring people that you don't need. All of these things, when there's a kind of awareness around them, and you're able to kind of get that balance of your own lifestyle, what you want your lifestyle to be, you can start to step out of the practice a little bit, right? And start to run a practice where it's serving your lifestyle and not your life just trying to keep a practice alive and afloat. So this idea of the freedom practice really is, it's a mental freedom more than anything else. There's at the foundation of all of this is being able to deal with the, I'm going to say the word brutality of business, because there is, we're dealing with, if you're an architect and you're working with high-end clients, or you're working with developers, these guys are smart. They're commercially sophisticated people. If you're working with wealthy clients, they're wealthy for a reason. They know how to deal with money, right? They've got a certain way of doing stuff. Public sector procurement is like kind of crazy, the way that building, there's a harshness to all of this. So being able to be free from your own mental friction and the way that we interpret these things that are happening, and the upset and the despair, that's the first part of all of this, right? That internal freedom. I'm a big believer that this inner freedom is the kind of, that allows us to start building businesses that can be systematized. And
I think you're preaching to the converted with sort of how we've set up Pride Road. Sorry, excuse me. So we are incredibly niche, and we just do residential domestic. We are very systematized. So we've got a really slick CRM system. So that's a customer relationship management system, which is fed by automations that are sent to the clients. So we do a minimum amount of form filling, but that information that the clients give us is retained. So we're not rewriting documents on documents. It's relatively intelligent. It's only as intelligent as people who created it, like us. And so, those systems really do take the strain out of the day-to-day running of the business. I can do a brief in a second, or a fee proposal in a second, because once I've captured the information from the client, everything, the automations are there. So I just have to press a button to turn it into a fee proposal. Awesome.
And it's interesting. Many architecture practices will spend a lot of time, reinventing the wheel, if you like. So you're kind of, each fee proposal is a brand new endeavor, and each sales conversation that you have is a new conversation. There's no structure, there's no script, there's no rehearsals, there's no practicing it, there's no and so each thing becomes a little bit what's the word, there's a less of a probability of it working when it's not rehearsed, or when it's not got a sort of element of sort of rigor or discipline or sort of testing to it. So yeah, and as architects, we like, we often try and reinvent it all the time, each project, and that can cause a lot of problems in a business. So,
especially if you're looking back at old documentation and you're pulling something that you wrote 5 years ago, and you're copying it and pasting it, and then you've realised that laws have changed since, and you just lose you lose the continuity, don't you?
Well, it's interesting as well in terms of architects don't typically have in the industry, we don't necessarily have a culture of sharing details and sharing drawn information. And if we look at industries like the software industry, on coding and coders, where their whole culture is one of open source. It's one of you're constantly adapting and sharing code and taking a bit of that code and plonking it into yours and refining it. And again, this is as an industry-wide thing for architects to have kind of shared databases of information and drawn information that's readily accessible and willing to share. And I think that's that's also a
I
very
think BIM
powerful thing.
helped that at all with like libraries in kind of in CAD libraries?
Absolutely, yeah. No,
Because
totally.
I've not, I've not really used BIM.
Yeah. Well, no,
Mumbling.
well, I certainly think those types of CAD libraries are very powerful. I
Mm,
mean, if we look at sort of one end of the spectrum of practices that are doing this to another level is
mm,
Bryden Wood.
mm,
Bryden Wood's sort of large practice in London. They started off doing quite complex pieces of infrastructure at airports and working for very heavy process-driven clients like GlaxoSmithKline, the kind of pharmaceutical
mm,
companies, and they are very tech savvy practice. So a lot of their projects are heavy on data modeling. So before they kind of start designing anything, they've got the ability to be able to collect a lot of very unique information through their kind of computational processes. But once they've started designing stuff, they've built these platforms where they're kind of uploading all the product details, all the building details, which are then being able to be shared between all of their clients in these different industries.
mm,
And at first, their clients were like, well, surely this is it. There's IP breach here. We don't want people seeing what our buildings are, the details of our buildings. And their argument was, well, your building and your business is going to evolve at a much more rapid rate by us being allowed to share the information, because it will improve and it will go through that kind of iterative process without us being involved in it.
mm,
And so a lot of the clients got on board with that, and they've got these incredible databases of, complex details and open source architectural information that has, increased the productivity and the efficiencies for their clients
mm,
tenfold. And they're now seen as such a valuable asset to these large corporations, these large process-driven companies. They're seen as problem solvers. They're not just seen as people who design buildings. At Bryden Wood, they've actually got a floor where they have their clients, right? So in their own business, they've got a floor where they've got representatives from their clients all sitting with each other. So you've
mm,
got someone from BAA and someone from GlaxoSmithKline and someone from another kind of infrastructure company, because they realize the value that the architects are bringing through their modeling and their sharing of information. It's kind of a win-win for everybody. That's for me, I find that really, really exciting. And
mm,
there's
and we do an element of kind of sharing information within the franchise. You kind of, we're all working in a similar field, so quick question to everyone, and we're around the country, we're spread around the country as well, so we've got people who work in national parks and greenbelt and conservation areas, and who's had an experience of such and such, what sort of planning policy are we expecting to find here, what sort of restrictions. No, definitely collaboration, sharing's the is really important, so we're not so isolated.
yeah.
Yeah. So what one piece of advice would you give our audience about how to create a freedom practice?
One piece of advice: how to create a freedom
Yeah,
practice.
just one little
Yeah,
thing, one little nugget.
I I I think it depends where everybody is at right now. So there's always like just a kind of self audit that's required to understand what's happening in the business. Like if you're getting fatigued and you're getting burnt out and you're tired, and like it's just a kind of relentless churn, there needs to be a kind of some interruption to that lifestyle, to that process, where you can just take a step back and have a look at what is going on in the business. And it often, obviously I always advise working with somebody that helps, working with a business mentor, having somebody that kind of gives an outside eye. Otherwise it's just a kind of continuous churn. And to acknowledge like what part of the business, where am I really struggling in the business. There's two types of practices. One is the practice that hasn't got enough work, and then there's the practice who's got loads of work and then doesn't know how to deliver it, and then they're kind of in that stressful cycle. So there's normally, I mean, for me, most architecture practices, the things that practices have the most trouble with is marketing and sales. And so if you're able to have some sort of dependable way of winning work, right? And most architects win 90% of their work through referrals. If there's some sort of system in place to make that a little bit mechanical, even if it's just periodically sending an email to all your clients saying, I'm looking for work, or I'd love to be able to help. You've come up as one of my favorite projects that I've done in the last few years. Here are 3 reasons why. One, it was a great design. We were really happy with it. We loved how we got the family involved, and you've got this wonderful kitchen. Number 2, you were a delight to work with, and I'm keen to work with more people just like you. Who do you know that would be someone of your caliber that would benefit from my services, right? Just an email like that once every few months, or having a newsletter that is that you send out to all your past clients or potential referral alliances. So these are people who in other industries, contractors, estate agents, or people who are kind of centers of certain networks who might be able to connect you with different projects. Just some sort of systematized way of keeping in contact and asking for referrals is a quick way of quickly systematizing something, or addressing a problem that many architects face, is this kind of don't know where the next project is going to come from. Everything kind of happens at the end of the month. All of a sudden, a random referral came in left field, didn't know where it was coming. We're okay for the next 2 months, sort of thing.
Yeah. Oh no, I absolutely agree with you with that. We do. I kind of talk about shaking the tree, or like I kind of visualize my process as a pipeline.
Yeah.
So it's kind of squeezing the pipeline along just to make sure clients are all moving along it. So we using the CRM system, which is amazing. We can record. We've got everyone's details when we first did an initial consultation with them. So I can see if someone's not converted into a workshop or a project, or have said thank you very much, but we're not, whatever. We've got access to a bunch of people within a certain timeline. So recently I went back and I sent a generic email to everybody saying, oh, hi, how are you getting on with your project? It's been a while since we had a chat. Where are you up to with it? If is there anything we can help you with? We'd really like some honest feedback. And it was brilliant. I got I think about 10% response to it, which I thought was quite high, and people were honest. We went elsewhere, your fees were too high. I think I had one person saying the advice that you gave was rubbish. I was like, okay. We went with another architect who said that they could do it and they did it. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But horses for courses, that's fine, and you've got to take that criticism. But equally, we had lots of people who said, we really wanted to go ahead, but my husband lost his job, or there's uncertainty. So all that self-doubt that you've got going through your head about people don't like me because my advice is rubbish. Actually, it's other factors altogether, and actually going to clients and asking them directly, you'll get a response. And yes, we did get a couple of clients saying, thank you very much for the reminder. Yes, we want to start the project. We're in touch, kind of.
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes it's so funny that we're so conditioned in a way to not want to come across as pushy, or to be salespeople, or to follow up, or to do all these types of things. And often, sometimes the client has got stuff that they're dealing with in their life. Sometimes we've got to be responsible and recognize that our sales system sucks.
Yeah.
like we're just not, we're kind of going on to a client and just pitching them something, and we're just showing them portfolios, and we haven't asked any meaningful questions, and so they politely decline. And but again, that kind of just following up, having some sort of rhythm to networking, to building your pipeline, recognizing that that is the thing that's going to feed the business ultimately. And the more sophisticated that you become, or the more that you dig into your niche, or the more that you kind of find the way of communicating that works authentically for you and is resonating with your target audience. Or I mean, more than that, it's like actually the more clear you become in what problems you're solving for specific groups of people, and the way that you're able to articulate that, that becomes the sort of the marketing system in itself, if you like. And it's the first step of building any business that has any degree of freedom to it. I don't know if you've ever seen have you read Rich Dad Poor Dad?
No.
So Rich Dad Poor Dad is one of these sort of personal finance books that every time I do a lecture at a university, I always recommend the students to read it. And it's kind of got a very cheesy front cover to it, and all the professors always look at me and go, "Oh no, this is not," but it's a brilliant book. And it's written in a very accessible and easy way. And in that book, he has a concept called the cash flow quadrant. So he's talking about 4 different ways that you can earn money, basically how the capitalist system works. You can either be an employee, where you're working for somebody else, right? So imagine a quadrant, right? 4 squares.
I'm drawing it now.
Right. So on the bottom left-hand corner, you've got employee. On the top left-hand corner, you've got self-employed. So this is what many of us as architects do, what many specialists do. We've become highly trained. We're of the mindset of, I can do it myself. My boss is rubbish, or I want to go out and do my own thing and have that freedom. We become self-employed. Now, what happens with being self-employed, typically employed, we end up owning a job, right? So we've now got all the responsibilities of what our boss had. We've got the responsibilities of other people working for us. We don't necessarily have any systems in place in the business. And the 2 defining factors of the employee and the self-employed is that they're essentially still trading time for money. Right. So as an employee, you have an agreement with your employer that you will come and do 40 hours of work a week for a set rate, and that's your salary. As a self-employed person, you've agreed some kind of lump sum money with a client, which might be based on some sort of hourly rates, rates of the people that you're charging out, or hourly rates for yourself. And there's an exchange involved in that. Now, on the right-hand side of this quadrant, there's the business owner and there's the investor. And so the business owner is somebody who is now learning to leverage systems and other people to help them make money, right? So, and the idea is that the business owner is, how they define a business owner is that you're able to leave your business and it's operating without you. So it continues to make a profit. So this means that there are systems that are in place. You've got strategies that are involved in leading people. You understand how to make the business profitable, and you've basically worked your way out of it, right? But you're still the owner of the business. You're still taking in a profit share. And then the final stage is becoming an investor. So in that business stage, you're having systems and other people work for you to scale up your income. And then as an investor, you're now using your surplus income to invest in other people's businesses or other assets, essentially.
Were those your children in the background?
No, they're kids outside. They're I think they're in the final rounds of a very aggressive football championship that's been going on for the last 3 days.
Okay, well, so that sounds like a good place to stop. So if any of our listeners want to get hold of you or get some business advice or mentorship, if obviously they're not interested in joining Pride Road, which I'm sure they would be, but how would they get hold of you?
You can always get me at my email address, ryan@businessofarchitectureco.uk. But first thing to do is to check out the podcast, Business of Architecture UK, or www.businessofarchitectureco.uk, and check out all the interviews that I've been doing with practice owners and entrepreneurs and business people. And there's lots and lots of resources there, and there's lots of ways to get in contact. And follow me on all social media. Follow me on TikTok. That's my favorite.
Yes. I was going to have a chat with you about TikTok, but that's cool. Right. Well, thank you very much for coming on, Rion.
My pleasure.
So you are my fifth podcast. We've previously interviewed the presidential candidates for the RIBA. So we've actually got Simon Alford, the incoming president, on a podcast, which is fantastic.
Super.
And coming up in the series, I've got Ben Derbyshire and Simone de Gaulle. And we're just starting conversations, all things architecture and business and marketing and all the things that we love. She says, questioning whether people love kind of marketing. I don't know.
They do. They should.
We do.
We do. I could talk about marketing for hours and hours and hours.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Rion.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And thanks everyone for joining us.